3 months had passed since Professor Vecca was taken away in disgrace. The Galactic Academy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. New rules had been put in place. New systems had been built. And new heroes had emerged from the shadows. Una stood in front of the mirror in her dormitory room, adjusting the collar of her formal dress uniform. The fabric was deep blue, the color of Earth's ocean seen from space. Golden threads formed patterns on the sleeves, symbols of honor and achievement. "You look beautiful," Hana said from behind her. She was wearing a similar uniform, though hers was simpler. All the human students had been invited to today's ceremony. "I feel nervous," Una admitted. "I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted the truth to come out." "Well, you got both," Hana laughed. "Now come on. We are going to be late." They walked together through the corridors of the academy. Everywhere they went, students stopped to greet them. Some bowed. Some saluted. Some simply nodded with respect in their eyes. Una still was not used to it. The Grand Hall was decorated for the biggest ceremony in the Academy's history. Banners hung from the ceiling, representing every species in the known galaxy. Lights floated in the air, casting soft, colorful glows across the hundreds of gathered guests. Una made her way to the front of the hall, where a row of seats had been reserved for her and her team. Taiho was already there, looking handsome in his uniform. Do-hyun and Minji sat beside him, and Sunwoo the Korthi was curled up in a specially designed chair nearby. "Ready?" Taiho whispered as Una sat down. "No," she whispered back. "But when has that ever stopped me?" The ceremony began with speeches from the council members. They talked about the investigation that had followed Vecca's arrest. 20 years of examination records had been reviewed. Thousands of grades had been corrected. Hundreds of former students had been contacted and offered the chance to return to the academy. Many of them had accepted. Una had seen them arriving over the past few weeks, former students from many different species, coming back to finish the education that had been stolen from them. Some were older now, with families and careers. But they had never forgotten the shame of failing, and they wanted to finally prove their worth. Then the council talked about the criminal case against Vecca. She had been found guilty on all charges. Her punishment was severe: lifetime imprisonment on a remote moon, stripped of all status and privilege. She would never teach again. She would never hurt another student. But the most important part of the ceremony came at the end. Admiral Kova, the head of the academy, took the stage. He was a Nalan, old and scarred from decades of space exploration. His forearms were covered with medals and ribbons, signs of a lifetime of service. "Today, we honor those who stood against injustice," he announced. His voice was rough but warm. "Those who risked everything to expose the truth. Those who reminded us that intelligence is not measured by examination scores, but by the courage to question what is wrong and the brilliance to prove it." He turned to face Una and her team. "Student Una of Earth, please come forward." Una stood up on legs that felt weak. She walked to the stage, climbed the steps, and stood before the Admiral. The entire hall fell silent. "For exceptional courage, integrity, and service to the Academy, I present you with the Integrity Medal," Admiral Kova announced. He lifted a beautiful medal from a velvet case. It was made of crystal and gold, shaped like a star with many points. "This is the highest honor the Galactic Council can bestow. It has been given only 7 times in the past 500 years. He pinned the medal to Una's chest. The crowd erupted in applause. "And for your team," Kova continued. "Taiho, Hana, Do-hyun, Minji, and Sunwoo, we present the Unity Commendation, recognizing your contribution to justice across species lines." One by one, Una's friends came forward to receive their medals. Each one looked both proud and humble, aware of what they had accomplished, but also aware of how much more there was to do. After the medals were given, Admiral Kora invited Yuna to speak. She had prepared some words, but standing before the crowd, she forgot them all. So she spoke from her heart instead. 3 months ago, I was the worst student in Professor Veka's class, she began. I was humiliated in front of everyone. I was told that I was not smart enough, that my species was too primitive, that I did not belong here. She paused and looked out at the crowd. She saw faces of every color and shape. Humans in Valori and Nalen and Korthi and dozens of other species. All of them were looking at her with respect. I believed it, she continued. For a while, I really believed that I was a failure, that I should give up and go home, that I had let everyone down. Her voice grew stronger. But I was wrong. I was not stupid. I was not inferior. I was being cheated. We all were, the crowd murmured in agreement. The lesson I learned is this, Yuna said. When someone tells you that you are not good enough, do not just accept it. Ask why. Look for the truth. Because sometimes the people who call you a failure are the ones who are afraid of what you might become. She smiled slightly. Humanity has only been among the stars for 200 years. We are young. We are inexperienced. But we are not inferior. We came to this galaxy not to fail, but to rise. And rise we will. The applause that followed was thunderous. It went on, filling the grand hall with sound and energy. People were standing, cheering, and some were crying. Yuna stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed by the reaction. Taiho grabbed her hand and squeezed it tightly. That was amazing, he said. I meant every word, she replied. As the ceremony ended and people began to leave. Yuna found herself surrounded by students who wanted to thank her. A young Valori approached her nervously. He was one of the students who had taken a neutral examination and received a low score. I wanted to apologize, he said quietly. I did not know about the codes. I did not know I was cheating. I thought I was just smart. Yuna shook her head. You did nothing wrong. You were a victim too. Veka used everyone to feed her own pride and prejudice. The young Valori looked relieved. Thank you, he said. I want to study for real now. I want to earn my grades honestly. Then do it, Yuna encouraged him. That is all any of us can do. Later that night, Yuna stood alone in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The celebration was over. The speeches were finished. Tomorrow, classes would resume and life would go back to normal. But nothing would ever be quite the same. Hannah found her there, staring at the distant lights. What are you thinking about? Hannah asked. Yuna smiled. I am thinking about home, she said. About my parents and my brother. I want to tell them what happened. I want them to know that I made them proud. You made everyone proud, Hannah said. Not just your family. Not just humans. Everyone. Yuna nodded slowly. She looked at the stars and found the tiny, faint light that marked her home solar system. Earth was out there somewhere, a small blue dot in an infinite sea of darkness. She had come so far from that little planet. She had faced challenges that she never could have imagined. She had discovered lies, fought injustice, and changed the course of history. And she was just getting started. Somewhere in the galaxy, other students were suffering under unfair systems. Other voices were being silenced. Other truths were waiting to be discovered. Yuna did not know what the future held. But she knew one thing for certain. She was ready. The stars shone bright and cold, full of mystery and promise. And Yuna of Earth stood among them, no longer a failure, no longer ashamed. She was a champion. She was a hero. She was proof that humanity belonged among the stars, and nothing would ever take that away. The Academy Council chamber was the largest room on the entire space station. Its ceiling reached up so high that it seemed to touch the stars themselves. The walls were made of transparent material, offering a view of the endless galaxy beyond. 7 massive chairs sat on a raised platform at the front of the chamber, each one carved from a different rare material representing a different founding species. Today, every seat in the chamber was filled. Word of the scandal had spread across the station like fire. Students from every species had come to watch. Professors had canceled their classes. Even maintenance workers had stopped their duties to find a place in the crowd. Yuna stood at the center of the chamber, facing the 7 council members. Behind her, 300 witnesses sat in silence, waiting to hear what would happen next. Professor Vecca stood on the opposite side of the chamber. She had changed into her formal academic robes, silver fabric that matched her silver skin. Her crystal eyes were fixed on Yuna with pure hatred. 2 security officers stood nearby, watching her carefully. Elder Counselor Mako raised his forearms, calling for silence. "We are gathered here to examine accusations of academic fraud," he announced. His voice was old but strong. "Student Yuna of Earth has claimed that Professor Vecca of the Valori has been embedding hidden codes in her examinations for 20 years. Codes that give Valori students an unfair advantage." He turned to look at Yuna. "You may present your evidence." Yuna took a deep breath and stepped forward. The holographic display behind her lit up with her first piece of evidence. "Over the past week, my team and I have analyzed 847 examinations written by Professor Vecca," she began. Her voice was calm and clear. "Every single one of these examinations contains hidden binary codes embedded in the spacing of the text." She showed examples on the display. The spacing patterns, the binary translations, the hidden messages. She explained how Valori compound eyes could detect the differences automatically, processing the information without conscious thought. The Valori students were not cheating on purpose, Yuna clarified. They did not know about the codes. Their eyes simply saw the patterns and gave them the answers. But Professor Vecca knew. She designed this system. She has been using it for 2 decades. The chamber filled with angry murmurs. Council members exchanged troubled glances. "Lies." Vecca shouted. "This is all fabricated. She altered the files to frame me." Counselor Mako raised a hand for silence. "Professor Vecca, you will have your chance to speak. For now, let the student continue." Yuna nodded gratefully and continued her presentation. She showed the statistical analysis next. The huge difference in pass rates between Valori and non-Valori students. The pattern of success and failure that could not be explained by chance. If there was no cheating, we would expect similar pass rates across all species, Yuna explained. Small differences would be normal. But a 63% difference? That is not normal. That is the result of deliberate manipulation. She paused to let the numbers sink in. Then she brought up her final piece of evidence. "Yesterday, during the oral examination, Professor Vecca accidentally revealed herself," Yuna said. "I gave an incorrect answer," she said, and I quote, "The answer is C, but it was an oral question. There were no multiple choice options." She said C because she was reading her own hidden code, the same code that was supposed to help Valori students. A recording played on the display. Vecca's voice, clear and unmistakable. "The answer is C, which involves information transfer, not energy transfer." The chamber erupted in noise. Students shouted in anger. Some were crying. Others were pointing at Vecca with accusation in their eyes. Vecca's face had gone pale. She looked around the chamber wildly, searching for someone who might support her. But she found no friendly faces. "Professor Vecca," Counselor Mako said gravely, "how do you respond to these accusations?" Vecca straightened her spine and tried to look dignified. These are the desperate lies of a failing student, she declared. She could not accept her own inadequacy, so she created this elaborate fantasy. The codes she claims to have found are nothing but random spacing errors. Her analysis is flawed. Her conclusions are wrong. Then, you will not object to a test, said another council member, a small Korthi with gray fur and wise eyes. We have prepared a new examination, one that you did not write. If your students can pass without your special codes, it will prove your innocence. Veka's eyes widened. That is? My students need time to prepare. The examination covers material that was taught last semester. The Korthi continued. If your students truly learned the subject, they should be able to pass. Unless, of course, they only learned to read hidden codes. There was no way for Veka to refuse. The council ordered the test to begin immediately. 20 students were selected. 10 Valori who had always passed Veka's exams with high scores. 10 non-Valori who had always failed. They were taken to a separate room where a neutral examination had been prepared. The wait was tense. Yuna stood in the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back. She tried to look calm, but inside, her heart was pounding. Everything depended on these results. An hour passed. Then finally, the door opened and the examination officers returned with the results. The entire chamber fell silent as the scores were displayed. The 10 Valori students had averaged 51%, barely passing. The 10 non-Valori students had averaged 94%. Near perfect scores. The numbers told the truth more clearly than any words could. Without Veka's hidden codes, the Valori students could barely pass. Without Veka's sabotage, the non-Valori students were brilliant. The chamber exploded with noise. Students were shouting, some in triumph and some in fury. The Valori students who had been tested looked shocked and confused, staring at their low scores in disbelief. Order, Mako commanded. He slammed his 4 fists on the armrests of his chair. Order in the chamber. Slowly, the noise died down. Everyone turned to look at Professor Veka. She was shaking. Her silver skin had turned almost white. Her crystal eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. She stammered. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, Mako said coldly. The evidence is overwhelming. For 20 years, you have cheated students out of their future. You have destroyed careers. You have crushed dreams. You have undermined the very principles this academy was built on. He stood up from his chair. The other council members stood with him. Professor Veka of the Valori, Mako announced. You are hereby removed from your position. Your academic credentials are revoked. You will face criminal charges for fraud, discrimination, and abuse of authority. Security, take her away. The security officers moved forward and took Veka by the arms. She did not resist. She seemed to have lost all her strength, all her pride. She looked small and old and broken. As the officers led her past Yuna, Veka stopped and turned to look at the young human. Her crystal eyes were empty. You have destroyed me, she whispered. Yuna met her gaze without flinching. No, she replied quietly. You destroyed yourself. I just helped everyone see the truth. Veka said nothing more. The officers led her out of the chamber, and she was gone. The crowd began to cheer. Students rushed forward to congratulate Yuna, to thank her, to embrace her. Taiho and Hana reached her first, wrapping their arms around her tightly. You did it, Hana said, tears streaming down her face. You really did it. Yuna hugged her friend's back. She felt tears in her own eyes now. Relief, joy, and something else. Pride, not just in herself, but in all of them. In the humans and the Korthi and the Nalan and everyone who had suffered under Veka's scheme. They had won. But as the celebration continued, Yuna knew that this was just the beginning. There was still so much work to do. 20 years of grades needed to be reviewed. Thousands of students needed to be contacted. The damage Vecca had caused would take years to repair. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, she would celebrate. Today, she would rest. Today, she would remember that one person with the truth could change everything. And she did. The plan took 5 days to prepare. Yuna and her friends worked in secret, meeting in empty study rooms and speaking in whispers. They could not risk anyone finding out what they were doing, especially not the Valori students who might warn Professor Vecca. There were 5 humans in the core group. Yuna was the leader. Taiho was her second in command. Hana handled the technical work, building the programs they would need to capture the evidence. Dohyun, a quiet young man with sharp eyes, was responsible for watching Vecca and learning her habits. And Minji, a cheerful girl with a talent for acting, would play a special role in the trap. They also had help from outside the human group. Sunwoo, a Korthi student with brown fur and quick hands, had been failing Vika's class for 2 semesters. When Yuna showed him the evidence of the cheating scheme, his small eyes had filled with tears. "I thought I was stupid," Sunwoo had said, his voice trembling. "I thought I did not belong here. My family spent everything they had to send me to this academy. I was so ashamed to keep failing." "You are not stupid," Yuna had told him gently. "You were cheated. We all were." Sunwoo had joined them without hesitation. He would help them record the evidence they needed. The day of the exam arrived. Yuna woke up early and spent an hour reviewing the plan in her head. Everything had to go perfectly. One mistake could ruin everything. She walked into the lecture hall with her head held high. Professor Vecca was already there, standing at the front of the room like a silver statue. Her crystal eyes swept across the students as they took their seats. "Today's examination will be oral," Vecca announced. "I will ask questions, and you will answer them in front of the class. This will test not only your knowledge, but also your ability to perform under pressure." Yuna's heart sank slightly. An oral exam was different from a written one. But she quickly realized that this might actually work in their favor. If Vecca asked questions with hidden binary codes, and if the Valori students answered correctly while everyone else failed, it would be even clearer proof of the cheating. Vecca began calling students to the front of the room. The first few were Valori. They answered every question correctly, their voices confident and smooth. Vecca praised them warmly, her thin lips curving into what might have been a smile. Then she called a Nalan student. The tall, blue-skinned alien stood at the front of the room, looking nervous. Vecca asked a complex question about quantum wave functions. The Nalan thought for a long moment, then gave an answer that sounded correct to Yuna. "Wrong," Vecca said coldly. "The answer is C, not B. Sit down." The Nalin's 4 shoulders slumped as he returned to his seat. Yuna felt a flash of anger. She knew his answer had been right. The only thing wrong about it was that it was not the answer hidden in Vecca's code. More students were called. More non-Valori students failed. The pattern was clear and obvious if you knew what to look for. Finally, Vecca's crystal eyes landed on Yuna. "Student Yuna of Earth," she called. "Please come to the front." Yuna stood up slowly. She could feel Taiho's encouraging gaze on her back. Across the room, she saw Sunwoo adjusting his fur, a signal that the recording device, hidden in his collar, was working perfectly. She walked to the front of the room and turned to face the class. 300 pairs of eyes stared back at her. The Valori students were already smirking, expecting another humiliating failure. "Let us see if you have improved since our last discussion," Vecca said. There was a cruel edge to her voice. "Tell me, what is the primary function of quantum entanglement in faster-than-light communication?" Yuna knew the answer. She had studied this topic for weeks. But today, she was not going to give the right answer. Today, she was going to give the wrong answer on purpose. The primary function is to transfer energy across space, she said hesitantly. Incorrect, Vecca said with satisfaction. The answer is C, which involves information transfer, not energy transfer. How disappointing but not surprising. Una nodded meekly. But inside, she was smiling. Vecca had just made a mistake. She had said, "The answer is C" out loud, as if the question had multiple choice options. But oral questions did not have options. There was no A, B, C, or D. Vecca was so used to reading her own hidden codes that she had accidentally revealed herself. "Professor," Una said, keeping her voice innocent and confused. "You said the answer is C, but this was not a multiple-choice question. There were no options." Vecca's crystal eyes flickered. For a moment, just a brief moment, something like fear passed across her silver face. But she recovered quickly. "A figure of speech," she said smoothly. "I meant that the correct answer is the third type of quantum interaction, which is commonly labeled as option C in textbooks." "I see," Una said. "May I ask another question?" Vecca frowned. "This is an examination, not a discussion." "Sit down. I just want to understand something," Una continued. She pulled out her datapad. "I have been studying your exams very carefully, Professor, and I noticed something interesting about the spacing of the text in your questions." The room went very quiet. Vecca's thin body went stiff. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "The spacing between the characters in your exam questions is not consistent," Una explained. She projected her analysis onto the holographic display that Vecca had been using. Some gaps are exactly 1 unit, and some are exactly 2 units. When you translate this pattern into binary code and then into letters, you get a very clear message. The display showed the hidden code. Answer is C. This message is embedded in every question you have ever written, Una continued. Her voice was growing stronger now. Every single one. For 20 years, you have been hiding the answers inside your questions. Answers that only Velori eyes can see. Gasps echoed through the lecture hall. The Velori students looked confused and frightened. The non-Velori students looked angry and shocked. Vecca's face had turned pale silver. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "This is a pathetic attempt to excuse your own failures. You are making up lies because you cannot accept that you are simply not smart enough to pass my class." "Then explain the data," Una challenged. She brought up more evidence on the display. "Over 20 years, your Velori students have passed at a rate of 94%. Students from other species have passed at a rate of only 31%. That is not a normal difference. That is proof of systematic cheating. Enough." Vecca shouted. Her composed mask was cracking. "Security. Remove this student from my classroom immediately." But before the security officers could respond, a new voice spoke up. "I think we should hear her out." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. Standing in the doorway of the lecture hall was Elder Counselor Mako, one of the 7 members of the Galactic Academy Council. He was an old Nalan. His blue skin faded with age, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Elder Counselor," Vecca said, trying to regain her composure. "This student is disrupting my class with false accusations. I demand that she be disciplined." "You can demand whatever you like," Mako replied calmly. "But the council has received a formal complaint about your examination practices. We are here to investigate." Behind him, more figures entered the room. Other council members, security officers, and a team of technical analysts carrying scanning equipment. Una felt relief wash over her. The plan had worked. The council had received the evidence she had secretly sent them, and they had come to see the truth for themselves. "You cannot do this," Becca said. Her voice was shaking now. "I am a senior professor. I have rights." "You have the right to defend yourself before the council," Mako agreed. "But first, we need to examine your examination files. All of them." The technical analysts moved forward and began their work. Vecca watched them with wide, frightened eyes. She knew what they would find. She knew her 20-year scheme was about to be exposed. Nenny stepped back from the display and returned to her seat. Taiho grabbed her hand and squeezed it tightly. "You did it," he whispered. "You actually did it." Yuna nodded, but she did not smile. This was not over yet. The hardest part was still to come. Vecca would fight back. She would lie and manipulate and do everything she could to escape justice. But Yuna was ready. She'd have the truth on her side, and she was not going to stop until everyone knew it. 3 days passed. Yuna barely slept, barely ate. She spent every free moment staring at her failed exams, searching for something, anything, that could explain why she kept failing. Hana was getting worried. Every night, she would come back to their room and find Yuna hunched over her datapad, her eyes red from lack of sleep. Every morning, she would find Yuna in the same position, still reading, still searching. "You are going to make yourself sick," Hana said on the third night. She placed a cup of hot tea next to Yuna. "Please, take a break." Yuna shook her head. "I am so close. I can feel it. Something is wrong with these exams. I just cannot see what it is yet." Hana sat down beside her friend. She looked at the holographic display showing one of the exam questions. The text was written in standard galactic script, the common writing system used by most species in the known universe. Below the question was Yuna's answer, marked with a bright red X. "Your answer looks correct to me," Hana said. "It is correct," Yuna replied. "I checked it against 3 different reference books. My answer is exactly right. But it was marked wrong anyway." Hana frowned. "That does not make sense. There must be some mistake." "That is what I keep thinking," Yuna said. She zoomed in on the question text. "But I have read these questions 100 times. They seem perfectly normal." She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she noticed something strange. The spacing between some of the characters was not quite right. Some letters were slightly closer together, while others were slightly further apart. The difference was tiny, almost impossible to see with human eyes. But it was there. "Wait," Yuna whispered. She leaned closer to the screen. "Look at this." Hana squinted at the display. "Look at what?" "I do not see anything." "The spacing," Yuna said. Her voice was shaking with excitement. "The spacing between the letters is not consistent. Some gaps are bigger, some are smaller." She grabbed a stylus and began to measure the gaps between each character. After a few minutes, she had a list of numbers. Some gaps measured exactly 1 unit. Others measured exactly 2 units. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2. Yuna stared at the numbers. Her heart began to beat faster. "This is binary code," she breathed. Hana's eyes went wide. "Binary? The old Earth computer language?" "Yes, 1s and 0s. On and off. The most basic form of coded information." Yuna's hands were trembling as she worked. Someone embedded a hidden message in the spacing of the text. 1 unit means 0. 2 units means 1. Or maybe the other way around. She quickly wrote a program to analyze the spacing patterns and convert them to binary code. Then she translated the binary into standard numbers. Then she translated the numbers into letters. The first message appeared on her screen. "Answer is C. Yuna felt like she had been struck by lightning. She stared at the message, unable to believe what she was seeing. "The answer is C," she read aloud. "The hidden message tells you which answer to choose." Hannah grabbed her arm. Are you saying that someone put the answers inside the questions? Someone was cheating? Not just someone, Una replied. She was already running the same analysis on the other exam questions. One by one, the hidden messages appeared. Answer is the answer is the answer. Is B. Every single question had a secret code embedded in its text. Professor Vecca wrote these exams, Una said slowly. She is the one who put the codes there. But why? Hannah asked. Why would a professor cheat on her own exams? Una thought for a moment. Then she remembered something. The Valori had compound eyes, made of thousands of tiny lenses working together. They could see things that humans could not see. They could detect patterns and movements that were invisible to simple human eyes. The Valori can see the codes, Una realized. Their compound eyes can detect the spacing differences automatically. They probably do not even know they are doing it. Their brains just process the information and give them the right answer. Hannah looked horrified. So the Valori students have been getting the answers handed to them this whole time. And everyone else has been failing because they could not see the hidden codes? Yes, Una said. Her shock was quickly turning into anger. For 20 years, Professor Vecca has been giving her own species an unfair advantage. She's been making everyone else fail on purpose. She began to download more exam files. Not just her own exams, but every exam Vecca had ever given. The Academy kept records of everything. If her theory was correct, the pattern would be consistent across all the tests that it took hours to analyze all the data. Taiho came to help, and together they wrote more programs to speed up the process. By morning, they had their answer. Every single exam that Professor Vecca had ever written contained hidden binary codes. Every single one. Hundreds of exams, spanning 20 years. Thousands of students from dozens of species had failed her class, their grades destroyed, their futures ruined. And all because they could not see what the Valori could see. This is the biggest cheating scandal in the history of the Academy, Taiho said quietly. Maybe in the history of the entire galaxy. Una nodded. Her anger had grown cold and hard, like a stone in her chest. She thought about all the students who had suffered because of Vecca's scheme. She thought about the brilliant minds who had been told they were failures, who had given up on their dreams because one professor had decided to rig the game. We need to tell someone, Hannah said. The Academy Council needs to know about this. We will tell them, Una agreed. But we need more than just data. We need proof that the Council cannot ignore. We need to catch Vecca in the act. Taiho looked at her with respect in his eyes. You have a plan? I am working on one, Una said. She pulled up Vecca's class schedule on her datapad. She is giving another exam next week. If we can prove that she is still using the codes, and if we can show the Council exactly how the cheating works, she will not be able to deny it. That is risky, Hannah warned. If she finds out what we are doing, she could destroy the evidence. She could make things even worse for you. I know, Una said. But I have to try. I cannot let her keep doing this. I cannot let her hurt anyone else. She looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, on planets across the galaxy, there were students who had been crushed by Vecca's lies. Students who thought they were stupid, who thought they did not deserve to be here. They deserved to know the truth. They deserved justice. I will need help, Una said, turning back to her friends. I cannot do this alone. Taiho smiled. You are not alone. Every human on this station will help you. We are in this together. Hannah nodded firmly. Count me in. Whatever you need. Una felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in months, she did not feel like a failure. She felt like a fighter. She felt like someone who could make a difference. The road ahead would be dangerous. Vecca was powerful, and she had 20 years of lies to protect. But Yuna was not afraid anymore. She had the truth on her side, and she had friends who believed in her. It was time to fight back. The lecture hall was very quiet. 300 students sat in their seats, their eyes fixed on the tall alien standing at the front of the room. Professor Vecca was a Valori, a species known for their crystal-like eyes and silver skin. She stood over 7 feet tall, and her voice could fill any room without effort. Yuna sat in the middle row, her heart beating fast. She already knew what was coming. She had seen her test results that morning, and they were bad. Very bad. Another failing grade in advanced quantum linguistics. A subject she had studied harder than anything else in her life. The Galactic Academy was located on a massive space station that floated between 3 star systems. It was the most famous school in the known universe. Students from over 50 different species came here to learn. 2 years ago, Earth had been invited to send its first group of students. 50 young humans had been chosen from billions. Yuna was one of them. She had been so proud on the day she left Earth. Her parents had cried with joy. Her younger brother had looked at her like she was a hero. She had promised them she would make humanity proud. Now, sitting in this cold lecture hall, she felt like a complete failure. Professor Vecca tapped her long fingers on the podium. The holographic screen behind her lit up with a list of names and scores. Yuna's name was at the very bottom. "Let us discuss the results of last week's examination," Vecca said. Her voice was smooth but sharp, like a knife wrapped in silk. "Most of you performed adequately. Some of you performed excellently." She paused and let her crystal eyes sweep across the room. When her gaze landed on Yuna, it stayed there. "And some of you," Vecca continued, "performed in a way that makes me question why you are here at all." Soft laughter came from the Valori students sitting in the front rows. They were the majority in this class. Their silver skin glowed faintly under the artificial lights, and their compound eyes reflected the holographic display like tiny mirrors. Yuna felt her face grow hot. She looked down at her desk, wishing she could disappear. "Student Yuna of Earth," Vecca called out. "Please stand." Yuna's stomach dropped. She slowly rose from her seat. Her legs felt weak. She could feel hundreds of eyes turning to look at her. "You scored 11% on this examination," Vecca announced. 11%. That is the lowest score I have seen in my 20 years of teaching. More laughter. This time, it was louder. Some students did not even try to hide their amusement. "I studied," Yuna said quietly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I studied every night for 2 weeks. Then perhaps studying is not enough for someone of your limited capacity," Vecca replied. She said the words slowly, making sure everyone heard them. "Humans have only been traveling among the stars for 200 years. Your species is still very young, very primitive. Perhaps we made a mistake by admitting you to this academy." Yuna wanted to argue. She wanted to shout that she was not stupid, that she had worked harder than anyone else in this room. But her throat felt tight, and no words came out. "You may sit down," Vecca said with a wave of her hand. "Try not to embarrass your species further." Yuna sat down hard. Her eyes were burning, but she refused to cry. She would not give them that satisfaction. The rest of the class passed in a blur. Yuna did not hear a single word. She just stared at her desk, her mind racing with confusion and anger. When the class finally ended, students began to file out of the room. The Valori students walked past Yuna with smirks on their faces. One of them, a tall male with pale silver skin, leaned close to her as he passed. "Maybe you should go back to your little blue planet," he whispered. "You do not belong here." Yuna said nothing. She just clenched her fists under the desk until her knuckles turned white. After most students had left, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up and saw Taiho standing beside her. He was another human student, one of the 50 who had come from Earth. He had kind eyes and a calm face. "Do not let her break you," Taiho said softly. "Something is not right here." Yuna shook her head. "Maybe she is right. Maybe I'm just not smart enough." "That is nonsense," Taiho replied firmly. "I have seen you study. I have seen how hard you work. You understand this material better than most people in this class. Your answers were correct." "I know they were. Then why do I keep failing?" Yuna asked. Her voice cracked slightly. "Every test, every exam, I fail. Only in her class. In every other subject, I do fine. But with Professor Vecca, I cannot pass no matter what I do." Taiho frowned. He looked toward the front of the room where Vecca was gathering her materials. The professor did not look at them. She simply packed her things and walked out through a side door. "I do not know," Taiho admitted. "But I think we need to find out." They walked out of the lecture hall together. The corridors of the Galactic Academy were wide and filled with students from many different species. There were the tall, blue-skinned Nalan with their 4 arms. There were the small, furry Korthi who moved in quick, nervous steps. And everywhere, there were the Valori, walking with their heads held high as if they owned the entire station. Yuna noticed something as she walked. The other human students were looking at her with sympathy in their eyes. Word had already spread about her public humiliation. By dinner time, everyone would know. When they reached the human dormitory section, Yuna stopped walking. She turned to Taiho with determination in her eyes. "I want to see my exams," she said. "All of them. From the whole semester." Taiho nodded. "I will help you get them. The academic records office should have copies." It took them 2 hours to get the files. The Nalan clerk at the records office was helpful, but the system was complicated. Finally, they downloaded all 12 of Yuna's failed exams onto her personal datapad. That night, Yuna sat in her small dormitory room, staring at the files. Her roommate Hana sat on the opposite bed, watching her with concern. "You should sleep," Hana said. "You have been awake for almost 20 hours. "I cannot sleep," Yuna replied. "Not until I understand what is happening." She opened the first exam file and began to read. The questions looked normal. Her answers looked correct. Yet every single one was marked wrong. Yuna read the exam again. And again. And again, something was not right. She could feel it in her bones. The truth was hiding somewhere in these files. And she was going to find it, no matter how long it took. Outside her window, the stars shone bright and cold. Somewhere out there was Earth, her home, the planet she had promised to make proud. She was not going to give up. She was not going to let Professor Vecca win. Yuna took a deep breath and continued reading. The night was long, but she did not care. She would find the truth. She had to.